My entitled sister kicked me out with my child, and now my parents are begging me for help with the mortgage after my sister's cheating scandal, but I'm not going to save them. I'm a 33-year-old single mother with a 5-year-old daughter. I have been separated from my husband since my daughter's birth because he cheated on me during my pregnancy and postpartum period, but that's a story for another time. After kicking him out of my life, I moved in with my parents. 2 days ago, I came home from work to find my younger sister, Ava, 29, sitting on the couch with her heavily pregnant belly. She had moved abroad with her husband after they got married. I was shocked because she had always been nothing but mean to me, never liked me for no particular reason, and considered herself superior. She would manipulate our parents against me, and since she was the youngest, she always got away with her nonsense. Even though she's younger, Ava is bigger and stronger than I am. I am petite and lean, and if she grabbed my wrist, there was no way I could free myself. Anyone who saw us would know I could never fight her physically. Yet my parents never believed me when I complained that she hit me. They would say, "She's your little sister, how could she beat you?" So I kept my distance from her and only talked to her when absolutely necessary. Fortunately, I got the chance to move out for high school, which was such a relief. Now, that monster is back in my life. Seeing her pregnant, I assumed she was there for her postpartum period. I asked my mom how long she was staying. Ava overheard and yelled from the living room, "I'm here to stay. Do you have a problem with that?" God, she hasn't changed a bit, still her narcissistic self. Mom then explained that Ava's husband had received a work transfer and the company provided him with accommodation. But since Ava was pregnant, they thought it would be best for her to stay with our parents, who could take care of her during the pregnancy and after childbirth. I asked my mom if she had the time to take care of Ava's child, and she meekly replied, "Yes, I have to. Ava is still so young, how could she raise her child alone? She needs help." I was stunned. Really? Ava is 29 and can't raise her child alone? I was 27 when I had my daughter, and I handled my postpartum period alone because my husband was busy cheating on me. My mom didn't even come to help me. She said I should learn to raise a child because it's part of motherhood. Now, when her golden child is pregnant, she's ready to become a nanny. What a hypocrite. Their favoritism has always been so obvious, which is why I've kept my distance. When I separated from my husband, I rented a house instead of living with my parents, but my dad insisted that I move in with them. He said their house was too big for just the two of them, and they would watch my daughter while I went to work. He also said that instead of paying rent elsewhere, I could just pay rent to them. It seemed like a fair deal, and I was going through a lot emotionally to think straight. Pregnancy, postpartum, my husband's infidelity, the divorce. It was overwhelming. So when my dad offered his support, I accepted and moved in. However, the support he promised quickly faded. My mom rarely agreed to babysit my daughter, and most of the time I had to call a nanny. She said she couldn't babysit full-time but could keep an eye on the nanny to ensure she was doing her job properly. Basically, she wanted to be a baby monitor. I thought it was better to have my mom around than leave my daughter alone with a stranger, so I hired a full-time nanny. Now, seeing how my mom is fussing over Ava, providing her with food, medication, and supplements, it's heartbreaking. Mom never did any of that for me during my pregnancy. She visited me only 2 or 3 times, and only once after my delivery. Ever since I learned Ava was staying permanently, I've had an eerie feeling that something was up. How could they agree to let Ava move in permanently? We don't even have that big of a house. I'd be happy to move out, but my daughter is too young to be left without supervision. Although my mom doesn't exclusively babysit, I still feel safer with her around. If I move out, I'd always need a nanny at home, and I don't know how safe that is. I know I'm a clingy mom, but hey, I'm a single mother. My daughter is my life, my lifeline. I tend to be overprotective of her, but what can I do? She's my everything. Update. Thanks for all the advice, it helped calm my nerves. My most dreadful thought came true. 2 days after my post, I came home from work to find my belongings packed and placed on the front porch, with my daughter sitting next to them. I asked her who did this, and she said that Aunt Ava had packed everything and made her sit there. My daughter is a quiet and well-mannered child, and the poor girl had been sitting there for hours, waiting for me. I asked her where Grandpa and Grandma were, but she didn't say anything. She just hugged me and said she had been waiting for me to come back because she was terrified of Aunt Ava. I asked if Ava had harmed or scolded her, and she sobbed, saying that Aunt Ava had been yelling something she didn't understand, and the way she was thrashing my belongings made her feel threatened. Furious, I stormed inside, yelling at Ava for an explanation. She smirked and said, "Do you want to mess with a pregnant woman? I can call the cops on you for harassing me. You know I can do it, don't you?" I responded, saying that I could also call the cops on her for harassing my daughter in my absence. She laughed and said, "Do you have any evidence? Mom was here when I packed your stuff. You know whose side she's going to take, don't you? At that moment, I realized it was futile to argue with her. I called out to my mom, but there was no response. She was home but had locked herself in her room. Ava's evil laugh made it clear that they had all ganged up against me. She smirked at my helplessness and said, "Take a hint, you dumb fool. No one wants you here. We packed for you and made it easier. Can't you see I'm pregnant and need space? My child and I are going to stay here, so get out." I told her I wasn't going anywhere because I paid rent. Before I could say more, she charged at me like she used to as a child. "You pay rent? Do you have a receipt or a lease paper?" "No, that's right. How long are you going to be a leech and live off my parents' money? You're a loser, that's why your husband found peace in another woman's bed, because you're useless. Now disappear if you don't want to get punched in front of your daughter." My daughter ran towards me and hugged me, terrified by all the shouting and chaos. I quickly loaded my car with my belongings and left with her. There was nothing left to be disgusted about. My parents were spineless in front of Ava. She wasn't lying when she said my mom was there while she packed. In fact, Mom and Dad must have helped her. There's no way she could have lifted or dragged my wardrobe and heavy suitcases alone, being 7 months pregnant. They were all in on this together. Her husband has a decent job, and they could easily afford their own home, but she stayed behind, determined to make my life miserable. She let her husband live alone in his company-provided apartment while she stayed here, focused on troubling me. I don't know what I did to make her treat me this way, and my parents won't say a word against her. I checked into a hotel for a week and started searching for a place to live. It was so difficult to manage work and house hunting at the same time. Finding a house in just a week felt impossible. One of my coworkers was looking for a roommate, so I asked if she would let me stay with her. No one wants a roommate with a child, but I assured her my daughter wouldn't disturb her, and I would move out as soon as I found a place. Thankfully, she was kind enough to let me stay. I've been living with her for 2 weeks now and have finally found a place within my budget, close to both my workplace and my daughter's daycare. However, I'll need to wait another month for the current tenant to move out. I've already made the necessary arrangements, just waiting for the place to be ready. It's been almost 3 weeks since I left, or rather was kicked out of my home. My daughter still trembles with fear, worried that Ava might come after us and harm us. My poor little girl can't fully describe what Ava did to her, but she cries when she remembers how Ava yelled and stared at her with wide eyes, threatening to hit her if she cried. She still wets the bed out of fear of Ava. I don't know how to help her forget that day. It breaks my heart to see her sad, unable to shake off the trauma. I can't even begin to fathom how unsafe she must have felt in my absence. That witch, who is about to be a mother, has no empathy for a child. I will never forgive her. If I ever get the chance, I will take my revenge and crush her. Update. I was waiting for an opportunity, and I got one. As I mentioned earlier, I had been paying rent while living at my parents' house for the past year. On top of that, my dad asked me for an extra $5,000, which he promised to return later. I agreed to help him, unaware that he was using both my rent and the extra money to pay the mortgage. Now that I've moved out, I stopped paying both the rent and the extra amount. On the 10th of this month, my dad called me in a panic. "Why haven't you transferred the money this month?" I got a message from the bank saying the auto debit failed due to insufficient funds. His panic made me laugh. He was so sure I would keep paying even after moving out that he didn't bother checking his account balance or maintaining emergency funds. I replied, "Hello, I no longer live in your house, remember? Your golden child kicked me out, so why should I pay rent?" There was a moment of silence before he said, "How am I going to pay the mortgage? I don't make enough money. The sales at my store have dwindled, and whatever little I make goes toward household expenses. I was using the rent money and that extra $5,000 for the mortgage." I calmly responded, "That's not my problem. I don't owe you anything. I paid for my stay and bought my own food. Ask your narcissistic daughter for help. I'm sure she would." Then I hung up. Within an hour, my mom called me. "Your dad is struggling to pay the mortgage, and instead of helping, you hung up on him. Did you forget how we stood by you when your loser husband left you? Is this how you repay us? Swallow your pride and transfer the money you've been sending every month." I replied, "Do you even hear yourself? You let me live in your house because I paid rent, and you used it for the mortgage. I hired a babysitter whenever I needed help. You didn't pitch in. What kind of support are you talking about?" She realized I wasn't going to take it like I did when I was a child. I know how to stand up for myself now. She softened her tone and said, "Honey, Ava is pregnant and needs more space. That's why she asked you to move out temporarily. It's nothing to be bitter about." "Excuse me." I snapped. She didn't request anything. She threw me out while you all chose to ignore it. She tormented my daughter, and I will never forgive her for that. My mom tried to defend her entitled daughter, saying, "She's a little immature. You shouldn't take her words to heart. You're the older and wiser one. Be the bigger person, forgive her, and send us the money." I laughed. "Oh, it's all about the money, huh? Well, I'm no longer the weak doormat you could push around. You always prioritized her over me, and by letting her harass my daughter, you've crossed every line. I never wanted to stay with you, but I did because I was scared to leave my daughter alone with just a nanny. But now my daughter feels more threatened by you all than by a stranger." She started sobbing and apologizing, but I cut her off. "I'm done being manipulated by crocodile tears. I'm not sending a penny." Since then, they've stopped calling me. It's been a month, and I assume they're managing the mortgage themselves or getting help from their golden daughter. I don't care what's happening in their lives anymore. I'm happy in my small home with my daughter. I've hired a nanny who looks after her after school. The nanny is a middle-aged woman with a son who is 5 years older than my daughter. She brings her son along to play, and they have a great time together. It feels so peaceful to come home to a happy and loving child. Life really does get better. We just need to hang in there. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for all the love and support. It means a lot to me. Secondly, I'm sorry for not updating this thread often. There are 2 reasons for this. First, I didn't have any relevant updates to post since I've cut all ties with my parents and my narcissistic sister. And second, I've been too busy with life. I got promoted this year, which is great, but it comes with extra responsibilities and, of course, extra pay. So, I've been caught up with work and motherly duties. But I do have an interesting update now. Last week, my parents showed up at my workplace. They didn't know where I lived, so they came to my work. I told the security to ask them to leave because I was too busy to meet anyone. I could see through the window blinds that they were arguing with security and weren't ready to leave. They looked fragile and seemed to have aged by at least 10 years. Just a year ago, my mom was carrying an infant in her arms. I guessed it was Ava's child, which got me curious, so I went out to meet them. They started sobbing when they saw me and said they had come to me as their last hope to save the house. My dad said he hadn't been able to pay the house mortgage for the last 7 or 8 months. Whatever savings he had, he used to pay for the first 2 or 3 months after I left. The bank had given them enough time to pay, but they kept defaulting. Last month, the bank kicked them out of the house and put it up for sale. They had been living in a dingy apartment since then. They came to me to help them save their house. I listened to them patiently and asked why their entitled daughter wasn't helping them. They lowered their faces and said her husband had kicked her out of the house because he found out she was cheating on him, and even the baby wasn't his. All the transfer stories and the company accommodation were lies. Her husband is still living abroad, and their divorce is underway. I was shocked to hear this. I asked, "And even after knowing this, you supported her?" Mom cried and said, "We didn't know about this. She didn't tell us. She said she was here for the delivery, but after you moved out and we asked her to help us with the mortgage, the truth came out." I responded, "What did you do after knowing the truth?" They said they hugged her and cried, claiming, "How could we leave her in that condition? She had nowhere to go. We drained all our savings to pay for her medical bills." Their situation seemed indeed very pathetic. I remained silent, thinking about what to do. Without thinking, I asked where Ava was. Mom murmured something, but Dad gave her a look and said, "She's at home. She refuses to go to work." Mom interrupted him, saying, "How could she leave such a small baby and go to work?" I laughed and said, "Really, Mom? You're still supporting her? Her baby must be 7 or 8 months old. Women all over the world go back to work, leaving their 6-month-old babies at home, and Ava is no different. Given the condition she's in, she should have taken a job much earlier." They kept pleading with me for help. I said I didn't have that much money to save their house. Dad said that if I could pay for the defaulted months, he could request the bank manager to stop the sale of the house, and they could continue the remaining payments in monthly installments. I told them I didn't have that kind of money. I had used up my savings to pay the deposit on my house lease and my daughter's admission to elementary school. My mom made a face at my answer. I said, "Mom, instead of making faces, try to understand that I'm a single mom taking care of myself and my daughter all by myself." After they left, I was feeling really low. My manager noticed my absence from my desk for over an hour and asked what was wrong. I discussed the matter with her, and she gave me an idea. I called my dad and said I was ready to pay the piled-up mortgage and the remaining installments, but the condition was that the house needed to be transferred to my name. My manager suggested that I buy the house. With my promotion and raise, I should be able to afford the mortgage. Since I had already helped them with the mortgage for so many years, helping them save the house would be a fair deal. In return, I would let them live in the house but without their low-life daughter. Dad remained silent and said he would like to discuss that with Mom and let me know. I said, take your time. I'm not sure if they have enough. It's been a week since then, and they haven't called me. It seems they don't agree with my proposal. They're okay with seeing their house getting sold off and living in a shabby apartment but not letting go of their golden child and living comfortably. Good for them. They made their choices, and now they'll have to live with them. Today, while driving back from work, I thought of passing by my parents' house to see if the for sale sign was up, but I brushed off the thought. I decided to cut them out of my life a year ago, and I will continue to do so. I don't want them back in my life. I'm happy and content living with my daughter and seeing her grow and achieve new milestones. She's now in elementary school, and I couldn't be prouder. Thank you so much for reading until the end. If you really like my story, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.